Green Bay hustle, grind it up. Hit the field, we don't bluff. Touchdown dances, feel the love. Jordan's got that MVP stuff. It's time for Ohio. Let's go. Packers bringing that show. It's time for you know who. Wanna go, gonna glow.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Ohana Packers Edition podcast, the podcast where one dude talks everything green and gold in the Green Bay Packers. I am Iowa Joe, and yes, there is only one of us this week. Mike is in the midst of traveling, so I am going to be the one bringing to you the week. What week was this? Who cares? This week's game against the Detroit Lions. Week 14's game against the Detroit Lions, and the last second field goal loss to the Detroit Lions. For some reason, Green Bay has really struggled with the NFC North this year. They barely pulled out a win against the Bears. They've lost to the Vikings. They lost to the Lions twice. It's really not something that we as Packer fans are used to. Yes, this game ended with the last second field goal by the uh, Lions, so it was a tight game, but there was a lot of issues with this game. So let's go ahead and get into it. So we will start with
Fresh cheese.
So, what was fresh for this week? And with it being a loss, of course, there's not a ton of things that you can consider fresh, but there were some bright spots. Let me look at my notes here. So obviously, Josh Jacobs, again, having 3 rushing touchdowns, being that bell cow of a running back that the Packers have wanted for a long time. And like I keep saying, it's nothing against Aaron Jones or anything like that, but Aaron just couldn't handle the the workload that a Josh Jacobs can, and yeah, the rushing stats weren't quite there. He only had 66 yards, but you tack in the 3 touchdowns that were hard-fought touchdowns, and that definitely is a fresh for this week. And it's I Jordan's had his ups and downs, and injury wise and a little bit play wise, you gotta fully figure that Josh Jacobs is the only thing that's really keeping this offense humming. So I until something different happens, I would have to say that you should expect a Josh Jacobs love fest from this, for the rest of the season, just because he's what's keeping this offense, churning out points and going. And again, that's nothing against Jordan. Jordan Love was, 12 of 20 for 206 with a touchdown. He's been relatively clean, but with Jacobs out there, it gives him a real weapon in that rushing offense that they don't have to put all the pressure on Jordan Love to be out there and make a play. So, for my next fresh, I am going to basically just say Tucker Kraft is a beast. He was dealing with all the trash talk coming from Kirby Joseph. He was, had to be on the lookout because Joseph is a notorious tight end killer. He's the one that caused Tyler Higbee to be out with the torn ACL. There was another tight end that I can't think of off the top of my head that he took out with a torn ACL because he hits him low. And there were some hits during this game that they weren't low, but they felt malicious, and Tucker took him with stride, even pulling a Josh Jacobs and motioning to a couple of the Lions defenders to bring more. And let's talk about the kip up. He took a vicious hit and kicked up, and back on his feet. He is athletic as athletic could be. There's not many people that can do something like that, especially in full pads. So stat wise, he did have 5 targets on with 3 receptions, 41 yards, and a touchdown. And the touchdown was a well thrown ball fit in a tight window by Jordan Love. So, like I said, this offense seems to be humming a lot with their playmakers. I know the big thing, and we'll probably talk about it a little bit later, is all these other playmakers are starting to come about that they're not targeting Jaden Reed much. Like in this game, he only had 1 target. But that's really a good problem to have, is you have all these playmakers you can go to. You don't have to rely on just one person. So yes, they will bring Jaden Reed back into the fold. Yes, they are. It's not like he was only playing a handful of snaps. He did play a good chunk of snaps. I think he was at 50% snaps for this game. But when you've got all these targets and only one football, you can only get so much, so many people, so many people, the stats that they want. So back to Tucker Kraft again, 41 receiving yards with the touchdown. He had a long of 21. The hits he was taking, the uh, the athletic feet of the kip up. You, he's probably the best tight end the Packers have had in a long time. I can even put him above Jermichael Finley and say that we haven't had this type of tight end since even before Finley was with the Packers. It's really a breath of fresh air. Man, I can't even talk. Where's Mike when I need him? It's going to make for an interesting time when and if Musgraves makes it back this year, because now that Tucker is the focal point of the tight end group, what's Musgrave going to do? Because he can't do as much as Tucker can when it comes to blocking and stuff like that and taking the hits. He is that seam stretcher of a tight end, and it'll be interesting. But it's again, it's a good problem to have. So let's go ahead and go back to the Love thing. I have wrote down here, Love had a clean game. Again, 206 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. He only took 1 sack. And, that was a Zadarius Smith sack. And we'll talk about Darius a little bit later. But he continues to put forth these clean games. Yes, you do wish his stats were up a little bit. The completion rating wasn't quite, 8. He was 12 of 20, so that's still decent, but you wish it was a little bit better. But let's face it, the Detroit Lions time of possession was 36 minutes and 6 seconds, and Green Bay's time of possession was 23 minutes and 54 seconds. So there was a big gap when it comes to time of possession, and when you have that gap, you don't have the stats to coincide with that gap. So I've talked about Love, and my final fresh that I see that I have wrote down is Christian Watson. Now he will be coming back in the later part of the segments, but Christian Watson really stepped up. He's been stepping up with Romeo out, 4 receptions on 7 targets for 114 yards with a long of 59. Like I said, we will talk about the other mishap with him later on, but the one thing I want to focus in on him was he's looking more confident and looks like he's putting more strength for his yards after catch. He's taking on hits, he's being physical, he's really taking that step again. Like I said, with Romeo out, he's really taking that step up and being that number one receiver. Yes, that does hurt guys like Wicks and Reed and Heath and Melton and other guys that are looking for targets. But, you know, with the kind of athletic ability that Christian Watson has the potential for, it's a good thing to see him get going. The one area that the one thing that I would like to focus in on is get a little bit more comfortable with the deep throws for Jordan to Christian. He had the one deep one for 59 yards, I believe it was. If Jordan could have led him a little bit longer or a little bit further, that would have been a touchdown all day. But you could see that Jordan took a little bit off of it, and Christian had to slow down to catch it. And by slowing down, it allowed the defenders to catch up with him. Otherwise, he had the defenders beat. He was open. If Love put it out there just a little bit further, not too far, but just a touch bit, Christian been in for the touchdown, and we could have been looking at a completely different game. But hindsight's 2020. You know, nobody can always make or not. There's no such thing as, how do I want to put this? Nobody can make a perfect throw every time. It's judgment calls on, okay, do I put this much on it? Do I take this much off? Do I do this? Do I do that? It was a great throw. You just wish it had a little bit more on it. So, yes, Christian Watson stepping up, hell of a game. Again, this offense is really starting to push forward. There are moments where you're like, okay, what the hell's going on, Matt? And with the play calling, but for the most part, I'd say about 85 to 90% of the time, it's a clean game. It's a good game for the offense. I'm not so much worried about it, and things will be looking up because you'll be getting Romeo back. You'll be getting Musgraves back at some point. Add in Marshawn Lloyd in there a little bit if he comes back this year. There's all these targets out there and these playmakers for this offense. It's going to be a hell of an offense going forward. And, you know, they'll be coming back at the right time because it looks like three teams are going to be coming out of the NFC North for the playoffs. And the Packers look to be one of them, which they'll end up probably coming through the wild card beings that they did drop this game and now have dropped to like 1-3 in the division. So yeah, it's going to be a long shot for them unless something happens where the Lions and the Vikings just completely tank for the rest of the season, which I don't even think that helps them too much. But yeah, you're looking at wild card. These weapons will be coming back. This offense will get even more potent. So again, having all these guys is a blessing more than it is a curse. And I look to see more play calls coming from Matt LaFleur. And I kind of called it. I said in a preview show that, all right, Matt, you need to start pulling stuff out of the playbook. Now, the play didn't work. They did run a flea flicker, and the play ended up not working. That's the kind of things that I would like to see more of now that we're in the final stretch of the season. Open up that playbook. Start calling more exotic plays. Hell, get Malik Willis involved if you have to, and just, you know, run a wildcat style play once in a while. Or, you know, what was the Eagles play? The Philly special. You know, run something like that with a Malik. You've got all the potential in the world with this offense. Get started with it. Get going with it. You're going to need it right now. So, with that said, let's move on to our next topic or section of the show. Stale.
What's this stale shit?
So it's really hard to differentiate what's stale and what's a moldy because there was just so much going on. We'll go with the Watson fumble. We'll go ahead and just put that in the stale just because what he did the rest of the game kind of made up for the fumble. Christian gets the ball over the middle, running down the field. He tries to make the play. He gets in, not really up in the air, but he kind of does an Ole move around one of the defenders, and the ball comes too high. He gets hit. Ball comes out. Lions recover, go down, score some points. Not an ideal situation. You hope it's a teaching point for Christian to say, okay, next time, ball security. We know you're trying to make the play. We appreciate you trying to make the play, but you've got to keep a hold of that ball because turnovers count. This is the type of game where any small thing is going to hurt you, and it did end up hurting them. The Lions went down and immediately scored. I think they only got a field goal out of it, but still that made it 10-0 right off the bat. And I'm opening things that I don't need to be opening. So yeah, they had already scored a touchdown off the first drive. The fumble recovery caused them to go down and score a field goal, which put it at 10-0. Now the Packers did come back and managed to put up 7 after that drive and that, but that's, the fumble caused you to go down 10 points. So yes, while it's not a horrible situation, Watson made up for it later. You have to be smarter in those situations. You have to keep hold of the ball, keep your hands on the ball, make sure you got a grip on it, and don't go in the air. Yes, we've seen some miraculous things like the reverse leap by Saquon and Tucker's leaped and stuff like that, but the situation you were in didn't call for you to go in the air, and it ended up hurting the team in a way. So, yes, that is definitely a stale. I'm trying to think what else I can put in the stale. Let's go with the offensive line. While they finally did start holding up and stopped allowing of it, the first couple of drives, it seemed like Jordan was under constant pressure. And like Mike and I talked about in the preview game, these guys were without the majority of their starting offensive line and pass rush. So for you to make them look like they're all pros, it didn't help the cause any. So while yes, you did finally settle down that first part of the game, yeah, you were making scrubs look like all pros. So I do have to give it to Rasheed Walker. He did pull out the Reggie one arm move, which is weird to see an offensive lineman do when it's more of a defensive pass rushing move. But I think it was a linebacker was coming in and he just hooked him and tossed him. Great move. Funny. Uh so but I'm putting the offensive line play in the stale just because that start of the game and for the first couple of drives and even a little bit towards the end of the game, you were making that pass rush look amazing when it should have been not a big deal. Let's see. Let's go down the third down defense for another stale. The the Lions were 7 of 15 for third down, and that was really a killer. It obviously it led to extended drives. It allowed for longer time of possession, and of course, it allowed them to go down and score more points. So while the defense has made some steps forward, it seems like they regressed a little bit from that Miami game. and that's not really what you want to see. I'll talk on it a little bit more here in a minute when I move to my moldy. But for right now, the third down defense was stale. So the rest of these things, I think I'm going to put into the moldy. So we're going to go ahead and just jump in to that.
It's a moldy cheese.
That's some moldy cheese. So I just got done talking about the third down defense. Let's go ahead and talk about the fourth down defense as moldy. 4 for 5 in fourth down conversions for the Detroit Lions. Yes, they did put them in. They weren't like long distance fourth downs, but you still wish your defense would hold up a little bit better. And what makes it moldy is the combination of the third and fourth down defense. Again, it extends drives, it allows them to drive down the field for more points. And the defense as a whole just really struggled this game covering the middle of the field, and that's where the Lions were hitting most of their conversions, was right down the middle. I know people are going to say, oh, well, Quay this, Quay that. Well, here's a stat. And while Quay didn't have the most perfect game when it came to coverage, he still had a lot better than the other two guys that are out on the field. So, per Pro Football Reference, these are the completion ratings when throwing at these targets. Quay Walker, 75%. He was targeted 4 times, allowed 3 catches for 46 yards. Okay, like I said, not great, but what is 75? Probably C average, about an straight C, not a C plus, C minus or anything, but a straight C. Wilson, targeted 3 times, allowed 2 completions for 66.7% completion rating. A little bit better than Quay's. Still not the greatest, but a little bit better. Isaiah McDuffie, targeted 10 times, 9 completions, 90% for 56 yards. That's your weak point. Isaiah McDuffie is not a coverage backer. He's a downhill backer. He's a rush backer. He's a tackling machine, but he is not a coverage backer. Yes, I know Edrin Cooper is hurt, but they have a guy that they drafted in this year's draft that is not named Edrin Cooper that probably should start seeing the field a little bit more. And I'm trying to look real quick at snap counts for defense. And he didn't play a single snap. I don't even know if he was active. So let's look at. I would assume he was active, but you know what assumptions do. Now, of course, that one doesn't tell me. So, nope, he was active. The inactives the Packers had were Jair, Corey Ballantyne, Romeo Dobbs, Edrin Cooper, and Jacob Monk. So Tyrant Hopper was active for the game, was suited up for the game, and didn't play a single snap, except for on special teams. Something's got to give. Yeah, Wilson had a little bit better coverage, but it looked like he was getting lost on a lot of things. McDuffie was out of position a lot of the time. Quay was at least was decent enough in coverage that he was sticking to the tight ends that he was covering, which it's Sam Laporta. And of course, Sam Laporta is a solid tight end. You're not always going to keep him shut down, but Quay was at least there to make the play on the ball when he could be. The same can't be said about McDuffie. So while I like Isaiah McDuffie, you can't have him in passing downs. They need to start incorporating Tyron Hopper a little bit more. Bring in somebody. There's got to be somebody out there that can start taking a little bit of snaps in coverage at the linebacking position. It's definitely not Isaiah McDuffie. And I know they're in a bind because Cooper's hurt again, but you got to do something. That middle of the field was a disgrace. To add on that, the screen defense. It seemed like the Lions were throwing a ton of screens and it was just eating up chunks of yards. And that goes with the whole middle of the defense type thing. The on the screens it looked like the defensive line and the linebackers were selling out, so there was nobody there to cover the screens. And of course that allowed them to start uh gouging out yards. Jahmyr Gibbs, 30 yards. David Montgomery, 33 yards receiving. It made for a long game. There's no way they should have been giving up that many yards on that many screen passes to those guys. But again, I had to put that on linebackers and a little bit on the defensive line. They were selling out. Half the time on these screen passes, the majority of the defensive line was already in the backfield. The ball was out. There was nobody to catch up to them. I know that sounds weird. I'm rambling because I'm just trying to make it hit 30 minutes, but the screen defense definitely was lacking. The final thing that I'm going to say about this game as a moldy take, and it seems like we have to do this one every week, and I seem to make up some kind of excuse for why I'm putting it there, but everybody in the world is saying it. These refs were horrid. There were too many calls that were it wasn't even the calls that they were making that were bad, it was the calls that they weren't making that were bad. And then when they would make the call, it was like, okay, why didn't you call this earlier? On I think when I was watching, I tried to watch some of the highlights again just to kind of refresh my memory, and there was a one of Goff's scrambles for close to a first down. Van Ness was getting into the backfield, and the lineman grabbed him by the collar and yanked him back. Well, he had already passed by him. As far as I know, that's the essence of holding. Okay, we didn't get that one. There's two major, or technically three major controversial calls or no calls. The first one I'm going to mention is, of course, the Christian Watson offensive pass interference. I know it sounds biased as a Packer fan that we say that we didn't like that call, but I think anybody who watches the game of football say that was a BS call, just because what was Christian supposed to do in that situation? He was running his route. He tried to get skinny to avoid the contact. Kirby Joseph ran right into him. They called the pass interference. It wasn't an intentional screen. It's not like he went out there and set the block, set the pick, or not a screen. They call it a pick play. It's not like he went out there and set the pick purposely. He was trying to run his route. And honestly, on one camera angle, it looked like Joseph threw his shoulder into him to draw the penalty. I don't know if that's the case. It just looked like it in one camera angle that's what he did. The next controversial one is well, I guess technically you could split it up in two, because there were a couple of no call roughing the passers, one specifically on Zadarius Smith. And I said I was going to get back to this. Zadarius, you need to get over whatever your issue is with the Packers. Half the players on this team weren't even there when you were on the team. So get over it. I don't know the full situation. I don't think anybody will ever know the full situation. You didn't get your C. From my understanding of it, the Packer players always vote on the C. They don't just hand them out. So something the players did not make you a captain that season. You were angry. I get it. You quote unquote got your revenge. You got one sack and only 2 other tackles. Whoopee, whatever. That doesn't mean you need to take off Jordan Love's head. And that's basically what you did. You intentionally threw your hands into his helmet, and whether the refs wanted to call it or not, that should have been a penalty. You dove towards him, hands spread out, punching him basically in the face. That's the quintessential roughing the passer. Next one, obviously, is the Amon-Ra St. Brown going against McKinney. Same thing, punched him in the face. Should have been hands to the face at least. The final one is the potential no call on the offensive pass interference from Amon-Ra St. Brown on that final drive. Do I think it was a penalty? Yeah, it probably could have been. But my big problem with that is Keyshawn should have continued playing through it instead of throwing his arms up in the air and expecting a call on it. He should have continued to play through it, which he kind of did after that. But by that time, it was a little too late. If he would have stuck on the guy and continued through it, who knows what that play would have ended up. But he threw up his hands, he slowed down, whatever. So I know it sounds like a broken record and sour grapes and all that stuff. But yes, those penalties were bad, or those no calls were bad. And I know there was a couple others that I'm probably missing. I know there were a couple different should have been roughing the passers that weren't called. There were holds that should have been called. There was other things, but some of those you can say, okay, well, whatever. It was not spur of the moment, but it was not visible at that time, and we're hindsight and everything. But a lot of them were. There were guys standing right there. There were refs standing right there that should have made those calls. They should have been made. So I'm going to wrap this one up because I don't have too much more to talk about. And when you don't have anybody to riff back and forth with, then, it kind of sucks. But, thank you for listening this week. Thank you for joining us. Please make sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Be sure to go over our reviews, good, bad, indifferent, whatever, drop us some comments. Let us know how we're doing, what you like, what you don't like, whatever you want to put on there. Hi, whatever. That works for me too. Thumb up, thumb down, whatever, and wherever the podcast platform you use is. Also, be sure to go over to our website, ohanapackers.org, for our latest articles, past episodes, and of course our merch shop. Please go over. We've got everything you can think of right now: stickers, mugs, t-shirts, all original designs. If there's not something there, or if there's something not there that you would like, hit us up, let us know. Pick something up, help support us. Tell us that that tells us we're doing something right, and it also helps us spread the word to other people because you are our walking advertisements. So please make sure you go over there, get you some good merch. Again, if there's something there that or not there that you want, let us know and we'll work on it. I will be back with you this week for our preview of the Week 15 against the Seahawks, which is the Sunday night game, I believe. So I will be back. I don't think Mike will, so it'd probably just be me again trying to ramble through things. As Mike would say, go Pack Go, and aloha.
Green Bay hustle, grind it up. Hit the field, we don't bluff. Touchdown dances, feel the love. Jordan's got that MVP stuff. It's time for be up, let's go. Packers bringing that show. It's time for you know who.